Thanks for joining me today. I'll be discussing the smart factory and how to avoid the perception of Big Brother. One of the difficulties in realizing value from smart manufacturing implementations is a lack of adoption and participation by the workforce. This is often heavily impacted by the Big Brother syndrome. If you're not familiar, Big Brother was invented in the book 1984 by George Orwell and was a repressive force in society that posted signs throughout the community stating that Big Brother is watching. Smart factory systems that are designed to monitor what happens in the plant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, can make it feel like Big Brother is watching if they're not implemented correctly. IoT systems that are monitoring production at all times can be viewed as measuring the performance of one operator against another. Video analytics systems that are for manual manufacturing processes are an even more extreme case where workers will almost certainly feel the weight of being watched at all times. At Visual Decisions, we've been implementing these systems to track what happens on the shop floor for about 20 years now. Some of the implementations we've performed have been in very difficult labor environments where there was very little trust of management to begin with. And overall, during that time, we've learned many valuable lessons about how to avoid the Big Brother syndrome, sometimes the hard way. In the early days of doing this work, we saw a lot of passive resistance to the systems where people did not cooperate with the process or entered poor information into the systems or didn't enter any information at all. We also experienced some much more active resistance where Ethernet wires were cut to the data collection devices overnight, and even one instance where one of our associates' rental car had its tires slashed. And it's not just the operators that had issues with Big Brother either. In general, people love having visibility downwards in the organization, but are not real excited about the prospect of the people above them having visibility. In one case, we had a plant manager that boxed up the equipment for the project and returned it to us when he found out that the corporate team could see what was happening in the plant. Up until then, he had been a big champion for us and was really happy with his own ability to track the production line at all times. So over the years, we've learned our lessons and we've become very successful at implementing these systems and at least mitigating the uncertainty and fear associated with Big Brother syndrome. And in this presentation, we'll cover how we do that. A big part of this is just fundamental change management, and it applies here as much as it does in any project. If you're looking for a reference that handles the basics well, Leading Change by John Kotter is a good start. So for now, let's just cover some of the basics. One is to look for ways to generate quick wins at the beginning of the implementation that do not involve monitoring people, and then advertise these wins and demonstrate that the goal is to improve the process and make the job easier for people. Also, encourage participation in the project from everyone. Let their voices be heard, and then actually listen to them. Third, it's really not possible to communicate too much. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then find those people that will embrace the change and work with them to generate those early victories. When people do not have a clear vision of what the future will look like, it's hard to embrace change. It really should go without saying that communicating the vision to every stakeholder for the implementation should be a priority, but it's very often the piece that makes things go sideways. And I'll focus on two areas where that's critical. Even before the systems are put in, there must be communication of the goals of the project to everyone involved to let them know that the project is meant to make life easier, not to have Big Brother watching over their shoulder at all times. Also, the vast majority of the data inside of these systems goes underutilized because people from the shop floor, quality, process engineering, maintenance, continuous improvement, etc., are not made aware of how they can do their work more effectively in the future using these solutions. The next facet of change management that I really want to emphasize is getting ownership of the change from the people on the shop floor. The main point here is one of philosophy. Most of the people that I've talked to will say that they want the operators to feel ownership of implementing the change in the process. They want them to buy in and follow the new process like the change was their idea in the first place. But fewer of them will say that they keep the operators involved throughout the implementation process, and even fewer treat the operators as if they really do own the process. So if the operators aren't included in the process, if they're not treated as if they own the process, why should they take ownership of that change? At the very least, make certain that the primary operators involved in the change process get their participation throughout it, defining, the problems with the existing status, having them suggest how these systems can be utilized effectively, and then making sure that you're following through with some of the things that they're talking about where it makes sense, of course. Next is to find a win for everybody. And again, this is just basic stuff, but be non-threatening. Emphasize that the solution is not being put in place to gather evidence for firing people. Communicate and demonstrate through the early projects that the intent of the data is to improve the process and make the job easier for everyone. And provide training to supervisors on how to use the data in a positive way and how to do the communication with the operators when talking about the negatives. Another thing is to try to make it fun. Some of these technologies are actually pretty cool. They can be much more engaging for the workforce than traditional whiteboards and such. And some of our customers have had success with kind of gamifying things and creating friendly competitions based on the production data being captured. Also talk about human-centered design here, where putting the human at the center of the process is an important step. So as you're looking at how to implement these things and how to utilize the data from this, continue to think about how to put that human at the center, how to make things better for them, how to improve the ergonomics of the workstation, how to apply the process to make it easier for the operator to perform. And those are the types of wins that can help you get the operator on your side. From a reward and incentives and bonus perspective, sometimes some companies have that kind of culture that allows them to assign some sort of reward or incentive or bonus with production. And if that's the case in your organization, look for opportunities to integrate the data and the production data being captured by these systems into that reward or incentive program. Another thing is, if you want the employees to not have that feeling of big brother, value the workforce and create thinking employees and utilize them for more than just their physical dexterity. One of the students of Taiichi, one of the fathers of the Toyota production system, said that they made a mistake. They never should have called it the Toyota production system. They should have called it the thinking production system, because the real point of everything was to make people think. And this can be highly dependent on the pace of the operations and the type of manufacturing being performed, but giving people an opportunity to use the data for process improvement will engage them much more fully. And speaking of that, where possible, make the operators part of the team that uses the data to improve the process. One of my customers initiated a TPM Tuesday practice where they stopped the line each Tuesday to look at the data with a cross-functional team to find opportunities to improve the process. And the operator was at the core of that cross-functional team. They would pick one of the top 3 issues from the previous week and brainstorm ideas to prevent that problem from occurring again. This not only improved the process quite a bit, but also generated a huge amount of goodwill from the operators that, first of all, they were an important part of the process. And secondly, that it drove a lot of ownership, of that system and the data, but it also helps improve their ownership of the overall process. Another thing is to look at building better habits. For those unfamiliar with BJ Fogg's research into behavioral change, I very highly recommend reading the book Tiny Habits. It's a quick read, and it talks about how to establish new habits and to break old ones. The fundamental concept of this model is that behavior equals motivation plus ability plus prompt. And if you want to install a new behavioral habit, you have to understand the motivation for the behavior and then tie the initiation of the action to some sort of trigger. And when you're looking at these systems, these can significantly improve both the ability of the people to address the issues that come up and also provide prompts to them to take actions at different times. And so you can significantly impact things that way. Another important factor in the behavioral change model is to reinforce new actions with celebration. This is something that's often ignored, but it's absolutely critical to the change. This also helps to break down that big brother resistance when people see the success of their peers being celebrated. Implementing these systems will require new skills within the workforce, and this can be done by training your existing staff, hiring people from outside the organization, or bringing in outside help. My strong recommendation for the implementation is to bring in some outside help to get things up and running in the first place. With a team that has kind of been there and done that, to get those initial successes under your belt, those quick wins that we talked about earlier. And during the same time, have people that will own the system over the long term with that outside team to develop their ability to take that ownership and run with the solution so that you don't have to pay consultants forever, but also so that your own people can manage this and continue that success over the long term. And just as important as it is to skill up the core team, it's also important to skill up the people that will use the information from the system. Don't forget to use this opportunity to train the rest of your staff on how to use the data from these systems and how to use the data in general to improve performance, how to improve problem solving, root cause analysis, and much more. Some additional lessons learned. As you're looking at the opportunities with Industry 4.0 smart manufacturing, focus on enabling your people and augmenting the capabilities of your people. One key area of focus should be how problem solving is done within the business. If you can improve some of the fundamental capabilities of your people, then there's really an unlimited opportunity for improvements within your company. This can be done by helping your people become more data-driven and training them to utilize all of the information available to them. And digital transformation projects like Smart Factory are an ideal chance to enact changes like this within the organization. Another key enabler is to focus on standard work. The standard work for operators should be looked at, but also the standard work for leaders and all the support staff within the organization as well. And one of the things that will help the operators embrace the standard work is if they see the support staff and management also embracing it. And this is one of the primary levers to create the data-driven organization in the first place. Having a common approach to how work should be done helps new workers get up to speed faster and increases the overall competence within the organization. And as a quick aside, this leads me to a quick example of why it's so important to connect everything in a smart factory implementation. One of my customers implemented an IoT monitoring solution on a single asset as a trial, with management saying that if performance on that machine increased, then they would expand the usage of the solution across the factory. But since it was only on a single machine, nobody really changed the way that they went about their work. The operators rotated through that station, and that was the only one that required, data entry into some of the reasons for downtime and things like that. But since it wasn't really a part of their normal job, they weren't really doing that well. Quality didn't change the way that they did their jobs to look at the IoT data because it was only available on that one machine, so they didn't learn the system. Process engineering didn't either, maintenance. And in the end, since nobody was using the data, the machine performance didn't improve, even though the system itself was performing perfectly. Once plant management was able to see what was happening and that people weren't using it because it was only on that one isolated system, then they were able to see that, okay, the system is performing as it was supposed to. If we make these changes in how we utilize the information, then we're going to be able to get the success with it. And once they rolled it out more broadly, made it a part of people's standard work, then they were able to generate some tremendous improvements in performance. Another thing is to look at different opportunities for improvement across different time horizons. And so when you look at within the shift, how do you respond to different events that happen? And how do you utilize the information? How do you engage the employees to make sure that when downtime occurs, when quality issues occur, those are immediately addressed and taken care of? On a day-by-day basis, daily OEE meetings or daily shift stand-up meetings should be taking place to review the information from these systems, incorporate that into that process, and have people know that this information is important because they're looking at it on a daily basis. Weekly meetings where plans get generated, something like the TPM Tuesdays that I talked about earlier, but those weekly processes where you're looking at what is the performance of the plant, what needs to be done to make things better, and then monthly status reviews with plant management and helping to keep everything moving forward in an optimal way. Kind of finally, word on Gemba. Utilizing data doesn't mean to sit behind a desk for management or the support staff. It's still required to spend as much time as possible out on the shop floor, linking what the data is telling with the process observation. Management should be engaging the operators and the supervisors as they walk the shop floor about the data that's being collected and what it means. Have the workers explain what is happening and why using that information is going to make a difference, and then make sure they're part of the team that has a say in what actions should be performed and actually taking those actions that are based on the data. That's it for today. It was a quick webinar, but some of the upcoming webinars that we have are listed here. Go to my website if you want to register for those. I'll have the invites up on LinkedIn shortly as well. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I know that this is a topic that a lot of people are interested in, and that can be very much what determines whether the overall project is a success or not. So please reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.